I've often heard people talk about the innovator's dilemma. What is it? The innovator's dilemma is one of those phrases that is often thrown about at work all the time. So this time we thought it would be interesting to look at what it is, why it's important, and why it might matter to you in your career. Okay, so what is the innovator's dilemma? It was first published in 1997. The idea was by Clayton Christensen in a book called The Innovator's Dilemma. And it looked at the challenges of managing both new and old products or technologies, whatever it was, as a supplier to those to the market. In fact, the subtitle of the book was When Technologies Cause Great Firms to Fail. The big example in Clay's book is about the IBM enterprise disk business and why it got away from them. Having lived through that and actually been a salesperson for IBM at that time, here's how I remember the story, somewhat simplified. IBM sold very large, expensive disk subsystems and cabinets, often costing hundreds of thousands of dollars per gigabyte. One of their competitors came in and sold systems of the similar capacity but at a fraction of the price. They did this by using lower quality parts and more of them, and using something called RAID. Now, RAID stood for the Redundant Array of Inexpensive Disks. So they took much cheaper disks and more of them, but they used software to back them up. So if something failed, basically the data was on one of the other disks, it was spread amongst the other disks, and it was easy to recover. Now, IBM's quite a technology-based firm, and at first they couldn't believe that anybody would buy what they viewed as bad or cheap technology. But what IBM missed was that technology was really good enough for many of them. By the time IBM got there, it was too late. You know, in a few months, IBM's disk business was absolutely decimated. Now, if you know more about the story, you know that IBM not only was involved in developing parts of RAID, but there were many people at IBM that saw this coming. The problem was that too much business came from the old disk subsystems to replace them too quickly with the new ones. How could the general manager of the business both manage the existing and the new business at the same time? This is the dilemma. The need to change, but the problem is systems and cultures that make it really, really hard to make that change happen. Okay, so what can you do about it? How can you use this? You know, the first and most important thing I think about the innovator's dilemma is to recognize it and spot it going on, and don't be blindsided by it when it happens to you. You know, you always have to be looking about to see what else is going on the market. That's a great behavior to have. Be ready, as they say, also to cannibalize your own business. You know, think of a company like Apple and how they do some of this. People said the iPhone would cannibalize the iPod, it would take away the iPod's business, but it didn't. And by the way, they had to do it anyway. The key way here is to think about the two different areas with different metrics and management. For example, your existing products probably have revenue or profit-based metrics, but your new products or solutions, give them things like pilots or references, give them a different set of metrics, and by the way, sometimes a different sales force. Also, you need to think about the business skills needed to launch a product, and they will be completely different from those that are needed to grow it. Look, even if you can do both, creating separate teams is sometimes really useful, and then putting some water between them. While that may create some competition within the team, that's but not always bad. And as we've seen before, all products have a life cycle. They all go through a life cycle, and at some point, every product is going to die. Look, you should of course try to minimize when that happens, but you cannot make your products immortal. Bottom line is this: there's always some risk that you'll cannibalize your existing products and businesses, but if you don't, at some point, somebody else will.